Alright, welcome back to Fish Hunter Outdoors. It is Tackle Tuesday here. We're talking tackle. Well, it might be Tackle Thursday if I don't get this video out on time. I'm not sure how productive I will be. But we're talking tackle. We're talking 5 baits, 5 setups you need in the springtime. Now, every week I'm going to try and bring you a tip to bring you more success in this coming springtime. We'll follow it into the summer hopefully and into the fall as well. We're going to help you guys put more fish in the boat with some tips I've learned, some great baits I've learned, and just what I think will help you be a better angler on the water. And that's the whole point of this. We're talking bait casters, spinning rods. We got the whole deal, 5 setups. Let's get into it. All right, so the first bait I'm going to talk about is a classic bait here. We got the Texas rig. Now, most people, they know how to fish it or they have fished it, but it's pretty simple. What I like to use is a 7'3" medium heavy fast action rod. It's a good rod because you can do anything with it. Texas rigs, spinner baits, worms, jigs, anything with it really. You could throw a deep crankbait if you had to. You could do just about anything with it, throw top water. But then what I'm using on there is a 7:3 to 1 gear ratio reel, so a little bit of faster reel. You could use 8 to 1 if you wanted. Something that you can pick up a lot of line fast because those fish are typically grabbing it and running fast or running right at you. And then I'm using 14-pound Seaguar fluorocarbon on there. I think 14 pounds is the way to go in most situations. You could use 17 if you're around some heavier cover. I like 14 because if you're doing a lot of different things with it, it's a good pound test in my opinion. And then you're running that, I like it on either a 1/4 ounce or a 3/16 ounce. I'd like to go lighter if you can, because the way I like to fish is maybe a little bit different than some people as well. I'll get into that here. And then the hook on there is a 3/0 or 4/0 EWG offset worm hook. I think that's the way to go versus straight shank hook, just because a straight shank hook, I don't think you get quite as good hookups in my opinion. And then as far as baits using on there, a lot of people, they like to go with the cross style bait, as we can show you here. Popular one, it can zoom in on there on that one. Your traditional, like your Rage Claw, something like that. A lot of people like to go that way. I really don't. I think if you can go something like with these beaver style baits, this one right here is a 6 cents beaver style bait right there. It's a really, really good one. Berkeley makes a good one. I mean, there's quite a few good ones out there. Reaction Innovations, that's another good one. But a lot of good baits you can use. I just like that beaver style bait a little bit better. And then, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the setup basics. As far as fishing it goes, obviously it's flip it out there. You're just hopping it along. That's how most people would fish it. How I like to fish it is a little bit more of a violent action on there. We can probably roll a couple clips of that. We're kind of snapping that bait along. I'm almost fishing it like a jerk bait. It's a little bit different way to fish it, but I get more bites that way, at least with smallmouth anyway. And that's my number 1 go-to setup you gotta have in the springtime on your boat. So let's get into number 2. All right, my number 2 style bait that I'm going with in the springtime is another really simple bait, a Ned Rig. And the reason I'm going with that is almost any application, it's going to work. You can fish it out there, fish it like a Texas rig, or you can kind of reel it and swim it and stop it like you would a hair jig. Now, I think this is a great bait to use because whether you're targeting largemouth or smallmouth, or you could catch pike, walleyes, crappies, perch, anything we've caught in this bait. It's a really good bait in the springtime to kind of, I don't know, cover some shoreline, cover anywhere with it, any structure. It's a great bait to use. It will get caught up in weeds a little bit if you're in shallow, so maybe that's where you go with the Texas rig. But if you want to catch a lot of fish, small or big, especially on a new lake, it's the way to go. The rod I'm fishing that on, this would be a Daiwa Tatula Lee. It's a 7'3". They say a drop shot shaky head rod. I think it's a perfect Ned Rig rod. The reason for that is a little bit longer rod, you get a good bend in that rod right there. It lets the fish kind of take it and keep them pinned a little bit more. Just have another Daiwa reel on there as well to pair up with that. And then normally, again, I like to go a little bit lighter on there on those weights if I can. Something around the 3/16 or something around the 3/16 range head on there. This one's a little bit heavier because that was from last fall fishing out deep, but shallow to deep to any species. If you want to catch a lot of fish this spring, fish a Ned Rig. Alright, and then as far as baits go for Ned Rigs, the two I would say to pick up if you want to have two baits in the springtime. A black and blue right there. And then a little Canada Craw, or maybe peanut butter and jelly. That's another go-to color. But just a simple Ned Rig, nothing on the end. It's going to catch you fish. They make a good bait that has a little bit of appendages on the end. Those are what I'm normally throwing, but if you're just going to, any time of the year, grab two baits, dirty water, clean water, you're set. Alright, so my third bait on the list. Now this is normally more of a smallmouth bait in some people's books, but you're wrong. It's a largemouth and a smallmouth bait. We have the drop shot here, obviously, tied up to a leader right here. And this is going to be the same line that I'm using on the Ned Rig as well. I would say 8-pound braid, normally what I'm going with. This is 8-pound fire line on here in that crystal color. Using a leader on there, so whatever color you use doesn't matter. Get a bright color line so you can see your bites a little bit better. And then as far as line goes, on here we have an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. Same thing with the Ned Rig. I normally go with 8 or 10, maybe 10 if I'm around some thicker cover. You know, less chance of it to break, but 8 pounds a lot stronger than you would think as well. On there, it's a little Z-Man drop shot bait on there. I just like it a lot because that elastic can stretch it, go through a million of them. It's a great bait, get a lot of bites. And then on there, again, I mean, I think that's a 1/4 ounce I have on here, but again, now it's for deeper water. Normally what I'm using is 3/16 if you can, something lighter. Once again with the drop shot, I mean, you don't have to fish it like everyone says where you're just popping it out there and you're just letting it sit and just hopping your rod along. You can drop it off the side of the boat. If someone doesn't want to fish, just let it dead stick, they'll catch fish. If you want to cast along the shoreline and hop it back like a Ned Rig, you can do that too. It's a lot more versatile than people think. I mean, switch up your bait colors, go with something that's black and blue for dirtier water, just like the Ned Rig again, and you can catch fish in dirty water, clean water, it doesn't matter. The drop shot's gonna get you bites in the spring, especially if those fish aren't biting on some more aggressive baits I'm gonna get into here. But if you want something that's simple, that's effective, anyone can use a drop shot. It's a great way to go in the spring. And then as far as rod and reel on that, 7 foot, actually on medium light action, well, power, and then a fast action rod on there again, just to get a good tip. So when you're working that bait, you have a little bit of give in there with that medium light power, but that fast tip, you're gonna be able to set the hook right away and just lean right into them. So a little bit extra give's nice on a drop shot rod, so go something a little bit lighter if you can. Daiwa Rebellion rod right there is a great rod to get. And then that reel on there is a Daiwa Tatula. Probably the best bang for buck reel there is. And I would say, I mean, it's less about the combos and more about the baits, but again, having the right action on your rod is going to help those baits work a lot better if you can. And a drop shot's a great way to go. So that's why that's going to be the third bait I'm going to be picking out. I'm not saying that's in a particular order there, but that'd be the third bait I'm normally grabbing. Alright, bait number 4 on the list. Not necessarily in particular order here, but pulling out the crankbait box here. Now, my particular favorite bait we're going to be using in the springtime, going up and down the shorelines, is typically what you're doing, some rock banks, somewhere along those lines. It's going to be this guy right here. Now, this bait right here, get a close up of that bait. It's a nice crank right there. It's a little Bill Lewis crank. I really like them. Have a different color here as well. I like throwing both these color cranks. Honestly, I mean, maybe some more stained water. I'll throw that chartreuse color in there. This crank right here is a 6-foot diving crank, so I guess probably the most important thing we're looking at is the depth range on your crankbait. A lot of people do like something like that traditional red square bill. I just have more luck with something that has a little bit more of a bluegill or a shad type profile to it. I've just had better luck, I guess, is what I can say with them. And I really like throwing a crankbait in the spring. It's a way to get a lot of good bites and maybe a big one as well, and something that's moving like that. And then the rod I'm throwing this on is going to be a 7-foot cranking rod. I do kind of wish it was a little bit longer, had a little bit more bend in it to get those cranks out a little bit farther. The reason I run this rod is it's a Dobbins rod. They have a good cranking series, so unless you want to use a glass rod, this is a good way to go. Their crankbait series has a little bit of a moderate action to it. So the reason you want that when you're crankbait fishing is so that when that bait's out there and that fish takes the bait, you're not just ripping those trebles out. This rod right here has a lot of give to it. It's going to load deep into the rod. And the reason that's important is when you have baits that aren't a single hook in them, you need that rod to load deep in there to keep those fish pinned. And that's exactly the issue you run into is fish are jumping off. But with a rod like this, it's going to keep a lot more fish pinned. Another good option for you maybe use a glass rod. I just like the sensitivity of this rod versus going with a glass rod, so I think it's a good way to go. On that, I'm going to use mono. You can use fluoro, but I like using mono because I'll also use this as a topwater rod as well. And if you don't have an unlimited selection of rods, it's nice to kind of double up on them. So this right here is just a simple 10-pound mono. Sometimes I'll go 12. I don't like to go more than that. Otherwise, you're kind of keeping your bait up too high in the water column. But that mono as well I like on there because you're getting a little bit more stretch. You can go braid to mono with a leader. I don't like that because with most of these rods, the eyelids are just a little bit small, and when you're casting, it's cold out and you get ice on your knots, you're gonna get mad because you're gonna get a little bit caught up, and you're just gonna end up cutting your leader off anyway. But using mono or braid, light braid, 20-30 pound if you can, is another great way to go. Topwater crankbait rod is what you need in your boat in the spring, in my opinion, and a shallow diving or square billed crankbait should always be in your boat in the spring, for sure. Alright, so my last bait, you maybe would have guessed it, it's a jig. Now, this is a really common largemouth bait as well again, but don't forget about it for smallmouth, especially in the spring when they're lethargic. For whatever reason, just jigs seem to catch a big fish. I think, I don't know, they say something with that skirt pulsating down there, it just makes them think it's a fish's gills or something that's real down there. Now, another good thing about a jig too, very versatile, just like all these other baits that I said, you can use this jig anywhere. You can cast it out there, you can swim it along the surface, you can hop it back on the bottom, you can just drag it slowly. Whatever you want to do with the jig, you can do it. And you can also fish it in any range. As far as heads on them go, I mean, this right here is a heavier jig. It's a 3/8 or a 1/2 ounce. I mean, this would be a 3/8 actually right there. That's kind of your go-to, I would say. 3/16 to 3/8, maybe a quarter. You can kind of swim those back nice. You also can work shorelines with them. If you need something to get down there a little bit more, something in that range might be your ticket. But as far as what I'm going to tie on, as far as next time going out, I'm probably just going to tie on this 3/8 right here. And the reason for that is a lot more things you can do with this. I'm going to be swimming it back. I'm going to be hopping it. I don't know where the fish are going to be, but a jig like this will let you kind of do anything. I like this color a lot as well. It's kind of just a neutral peanut butter and jelly color, they call it. And then, yeah, really anything you can do on a jig, which is nice. As far as the line goes on here, this line I'm tying it up with is some 17-pound fluorocarbon. So with this, I'm beefing it up over that Texas rig just because a jig, I tend to want to fish it in some heavier cover, kind of flip it in some thick weed patches, flip it in some thick rock is the main reason. And as you might know, when you get into a thick rock pile or you're dragging it through some rocks, you tend to get some big nicks in your line. And the last thing you want is to be out there and there's a nick in your line, you set the hook and boom, that jig's gone because you forgot to check your line. At least this just gives me a little bit more reassurance on there for that. And there it is, it's all tied up. Just a simple Palmer knot, the only knot I actually know how to tie, so it works really well. And then you're sticking a trailer on there. Normally when I'm using something just like this guy right there, I think a cross style trailer is best on there. You can go with that beaver style, I actually like more in a Texas rig, but when you're going to jigs, I think a craw is the way to go. Something like that's a neutral color, but dirty water, black and blue, clean water, your reds and your minnow colors are the way to go. That watermelon is a great color and you really can't beat it. So as far as that goes, it's pretty much a pattern throughout everything is same color patterns, just a little bit different line, a little bit different presentations, and you can use these baits anywhere, especially in the spring, but any time of the year. On this setup here, we got a little bit heavier rod as well. On here is the Shimano Zodius. We're running a 7'2" heavy action. It fishes a little bit more like a medium heavy in my opinion. It has enough give in that tip on there. And when you're setting the hook with a jig, you still get a nice feel on the rod. It's not anything that you can't feel what you're doing down there, which I like. It's a little bit heavier. So if you're fishing all day, you start to feel it a little bit. And then the reel on there, that's the Shimano Tranks actually. This reel, again, it's a little bit more beefed up, but the reason for that, I also use this rod for frogs, for A-rigs, for anything that takes a lot more power. So I don't know, it works really well for me. It's held up for the last 4 years really nice. And you can do anything with this setup again, but in the springtime, I have a jig tied on here. Maybe I'll tie a top water on, like a whopper plop or something heavy if I needed, but I mean, jigs are always a way to go, no matter the time of the year. And in the springtime, you get big fish. So that's why I'm throwing a jig. Lots of different color options out there. I really like the all-terrain tackle. Jigs, they are awesome. There's that watermelon color I'm talking about. Clear water, best jig on the market. Black and blue, dirty water, best jig on the market. Just best hook keeper, best hook on there. And then as far as stained water to clear water and bluegill imitating patterns, that is a sneaky little color, the Texas craw. But anyway, I mean, a lot of different options here. The biggest thing is go with something you kind of learn to be confident in a new lake. And when you get to a new lake and you start to catch a few fish, branch out, find a different way. If they're not biting, maybe they just need a little bit different switch up. Maybe they don't want the Texas rig, maybe they want the jig, or vice versa. Maybe you go from the drop shot to the Ned rig and you cover a little bit more water with the crank and you find something that's really kind of working out for you, and you just keep building on that pattern. And these 5 baits will give you the best opportunity to build a pattern on any lake, any part of the country in the springtime of the year. So take that in mind next time you're on the water, guys, and thanks for tuning in. See you on the next one. Okay, watch this.
Boom, bacon.
Let's go. Let's go. Right where I thought they would be.
Well, double cali.
You get a picture of me, please? I think that's a 5 or